Review of the trailer for the new movie, The Running Man. It's impossible to start this review without first talking about the source material, Stephen King's The Running Man. Back then, however, it was published under his pen name, Richard Bachman. King was writing so much that he was embarrassed to release everything under his own name, so he invented this alter ego. And that's why my favorite writer is not Stephen King. It's Richard Bachman. The Running Man is an incredible work. To begin with, it's a dystopia. A not-so-distant future. Ecological crisis, polluted air to the point where people can hardly breathe, and a collapsing economy. Instead of regular dollars, a new currency appears. New dollars. In fact, in my own novel, yes, I'm also a writer, I included a little Easter egg for Richard Bachman and called the currency New Hryvnias. A bit of self-promo here. Check out Lviv's secrets. Back to the point. The poor are forced to participate in TV shows where they risk their health and even their lives for a small amount of money to keep their families alive. Doesn't it seem like Suzanne Collins, the author of The Hunger Games, might have been inspired by Stephen King? He shaped so many authors. This book is practically a manual on how to build a story. It has a perfect setup, rising action, climax with a shocking twist, and a resolution. And what a resolution! The Red Wedding in George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire looks tame in comparison. Martin, too, was inspired by Richard Bachman. Even Squid Game borrows heavily from this story. That's how fundamental Stephen King is. And let's not forget, great writers often act as prophets. Jules Verne predicted automobiles, and Stephen King predicted 9/11. In The Running Man, a plane crashes into a skyscraper. The only downside of the book, for me, is that I read it as a teenager. At the time, the described technology felt groundbreaking. Today, with GPS trackers on every phone, some plot twists don't hit as hard. You could already see similar devices in Universal Soldier or Terminator 2. That's why classics sometimes don't impress modern readers. For example, in The Shawshank Redemption, the main character hides his tunnel behind a poster of Rita Hayworth and digs his way out of prison. Brilliant, right? But when I read it, it wasn't a surprise, because I had already seen the exact same plot in Tom and Jerry. Of course, King came up with it first, but I encountered the copy before the original. That's the thing about classics. They may feel predictable today, but they were groundbreaking in their time. Now, let's talk about the first movie adaptation of The Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's an interesting film, but it has nothing to do with the book. The original is a dystopia about a desperate man who enters this brutal show to save his sick child. In the movie, though, Schwarzenegger plays a framed police officer, and a love interest is thrown in for good measure. Even the casting was off. In my mind, the protagonist was someone like a young Keanu Reeves. Tall, lean, desperate, not a muscle-bound action hero. And honestly, good Stephen King adaptations are rare. Judging by the new trailer, this time won't be any better. How could they turn such a dark, mesmerizing dystopia into a comedy? The novel is a thriller that grips you from the first page and doesn't let go until the very end, not some poor parody of Deadpool. At its core, the story isn't a comedy or even a pure action movie. It's a drama, almost a detective story. The protagonist isn't a superhero with endless jokes. He's just an ordinary man being hunted. That's the feeling the adaptation should capture. Fights, chases, survival, all of it should feel raw and real. But from what we see in the trailer, this looks more like a festive holiday action comedy with bright lights and jokes, completely missing the bleak atmosphere of the slums and the desperation of survival. And yet, despite the grim tone, I truly recommend reading the book. It's also full of love and kindness. The hero doesn't risk everything for fun. He does it to save the people he loves. And isn't that a timeless, relevant question? Some people can't make ends meet, while others can't even count their wealth because it's so vast. What do you think? Share your opinion in the comments.